used to publish called Regional Key Metrics, which was not part of their official filings, but it was available on their investor website. So at the end of 2013, Herbalife claimed that it had 3.7 million distributors worldwide. That's from their SEC filings. During the course of 2014, Herbalife signed up 2,235,422 new distributors. But at the end of 2014, going back to their SEC filings, they said they had a total of 4 million distributors. So they recruited 2.2 million distributors, but they only increased the total number of distributors by 300,000. In 2015, they signed up 2,079,438 new distributors. But at the end of 2015, they still had 4 million. That's the number they had at the beginning of the year. During 2016, they signed up 1,939,291 new distributors. But at the end of 2016, they still had 4 million distributors. So what's going on here? The recruiting engine is going full force, but they're losing almost as many people as they're recruiting. It's like the Red Queen in Alice Through the Looking Glass, who has to run as fast as she can to stay in one place. And I see Elizabeth laughing. I'm a big fan of Alice in Wonderland and MLM. And this is a situation, I've seen this with other companies. This is not unique to Herbalife. Very high attrition rates, especially at the bottom of the plan. No attrition at the top. But a successful MLM has to keep that recruiting machine running at full speed in order to maintain its existence. So I'm hoping our panel can help us with at least some of these issues. And to start off, let me introduce Eric Scheidler. Eric is a former federal auditor. He's also a former Amway Emerald distributor, which is a very high level in the Amway system. So Eric, as in the Amway world, was considered a success. But as you can read about in his book, Merchants of Deception, which is available for free online. And I urge you, if you have any interest in this topic, to read the book. It's an excellent book. You'll find out that the success was not as portrayed. So without further ado, let me turn the podium over to Eric, and let's listen.
Thanks, Doug. It's great to be with you, and I appreciate everyone that's on the call today. I hope this is really helpful. I was a high-level leader in a motivational organization associated with an MLM, and I was the last one that wanted to discover multi-level marketing as a fraud. I invested a decade of my life in this and was a true believer. So I was the last one that wanted to discover what I did. I rose to about the 125th of 1% in the nation and was flown to Argentina and the Philippines to help open recruitment in those countries, and spoke to stage to thousands of distributor investors. And I use that term specifically, distributor investors, because people that are recruited into MLMs are truly investors that are just brought in and recruited to the bottom of the pyramid. After nearly a decade at one of the highest levels, I discovered, to my great dismay, that virtually everyone involved was losing money. It's somewhere around a 99% loss rate after expenses and excessive product purchases. And I ended up working as a federal auditor. It led me to dive deeply into what happened, like when I realized that myself and I was defrauded, and I've been used to defraud literally thousands of other good, honorable people. It was devastating to me. It was soul crushing because I thought I was helping and serving these people. Uh, and as a former federal auditor, it led me to dive deeply into the industry to understand exactly how this is done. And I wrote quite a bit about it online, and ended up receiving thousands of victim statements from around the world. I think 34 or 36 nations. And the thing that was stunning to me was their stories were virtually identical in every case, and how they were recruited and how they were indoctrinated. Uh, that's what I want to talk to you about today, is that their experiences are basically broken down into two parts: recruitment and retention. So how are people recruited? Well, you're recruited by usually someone that you know, like, and trust. It's a good friend, family member, colleague. And the pitch is something like this. The pitch that got me was, hey, I'm working with a millionaire and you seem like a real sharp guy and he's expanding a company in this area and you may be a fit. Uh, you'll then go to a one-on-one meeting or a house meeting or a meeting at a hotel or a webinar. Uh, and you'll hear this incredibly successful person tell their rags to riches story. And they talk about in their presentation, every successful person has a dream. What was Martin Luther King's most famous speech? I have a what? And they build on that and build on that. And they say, listen, no one has succeeded without a dream. What's yours? What would you like to have? Would you like to become totally debt free? Would you like to pay off your house? Would you like to help your wife retire? Would you like to retire early? Would you like to serve your church? Would you like to spend more time with your kids? And these are all yes questions. And then they ask you to basically talk about what your dream is. And then they show you exactly how this opportunity will get that. And the pitch is very little bit, but usually you're told in 3 to 12 months, you can generate an extra 3 to 4,000 a month with this side hustle. And in 2 to 5 years, you can achieve total financial freedom. You can quit your job, fire your boss, spend time with your kids, travel the world, live in a dream home or multiple dream homes. Uh, and you succeed only by helping others succeed. Uh, that it's described almost like a McDonald's franchise, but better than having one McDonald's you have to work at, you have a small percentage of 100 McDonald's, and you succeed only by helping others succeed. Uh, and that's very appealing. It's a very appealing pitch. It's completely fraudulent, but it's a very appealing pitch. And then you're brought to a larger seminar usually, and this is where the apparent credibility comes in. A decade ago or more, when I was involved, you go to a seminar and you could hear someone like Ford, Reagan, Bush, Senator Rick Santorum, Newt Gingrich, uh, I met Dave Thomas from Wendy's. He came in and we spoke at a seminar together. So it all appears to be working. It appears to be legitimate. The wealth seems to be there. I was in my former uplines, Ferrari, his Mercedes, his $500,000 coach, his dream home, a private island that he owned, a 2,000-acre ranch. I was on a private jet. Like this, it all seems to be very legitimate, but it's not. It's the recruitment of the masses of new distributor investors that Doug referred to at the bottom of the pyramid, that are forever cycling through in an incredible churn rate, because the vast majority are not only not making money, they're losing a significant amount of money. The retention is what's most interesting, and I'm really thrilled to hear Steve Hassan's talk on this, because he's one of the world's foremost experts on cult indoctrination and psychology. When I came out, I had some real psychological challenges, and I wasn't sure what it was, because when you brought into this, you're exposed to what appears to be personal development on the surface, but it's not. It's more a really subtle, deep psychological manipulation and indoctrination. And we've all heard the story of the frog in the pot. If you throw a frog in a pot of hot water, it jumps right out. But if you throw it in room temperature water and increase it 1 degree every few minutes, it doesn't realize that its environment is subtly shifting, and eventually it boils to death in the pot. And that's kind of what happens with the indoctrination. In the large seminars, couples are brought on stage and portrayed as tremendously successful, and they talk about the freedom that they have, the complete economic and time freedom. And in shifting your environment, people begin to be told, well, you have to avoid negative people. And negative people are anyone that will speak against or criticize the MLM that you're part of. And you need to block out critics because they won't pay your bills. So if some well-meaning relative says, hey, I'm concerned about how much time you're putting in this, or you're not really making a profit yet and it's been years, you're just indoctrinated to completely block that out and think only positive thoughts. Eventually, people in MLM go from being normal people with critical thinking abilities to slowly coming to believe that the only way that they can be happy, serve God, and serve their family is through this MLM. And quitters never win, and winners never quit. And I had a former upline in my motivational organization that would say things like this. So a guy told me he was going to quit the other day. He was thinking about it. And I told him, wake up your wife tonight. Tell her she's not worthy of your best effort. And then go wake up your children and tell them that they're not worthy of your very best. So there's some really abusive psychological manipulation that goes into this. And from all the victim statements that came in, I had statements of divorces, multiple suicides from around the country and around the world, bankruptcy, foreclosure, job loss. This is not an innocuous industry. This is a tremendously harmful industry. So with that, I'm probably going over my time. We've got a lot of panelists, so I'll defer back to you, Doug.
Thanks very much, Eric, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions for you. Our next panelist is Dr. Moira O'Sullivan. She is a lecturer at Munster Technological University in Cork, Ireland, and her research focuses on female consumer behavior, including multi-level marketing. So Moira, thanks very much for being here, and thanks for all the work that you have done to make this conference a success. And I will stop my video.
Hi, everyone. I have been so focused on, making sure everything is recorded and running smoothly that I now find myself extremely nervous to suddenly have to start speaking about my actual work. I'm going to share a screen. You may get a fright when you see it because it has a lot of slides, but they are mostly images. Obviously, I'm going to have to kind of talk through the images a little bit to help our translators. So as we said, my name is Dr. Moira O'Sullivan. My PhD is in consumer behavior, and in particular, I study women's consumption communities. The reason that I started looking at MLM and anti-MLM communities are because it has been described in the literature as gendered work. We can see why when we look at these statistics here. In the US, 77% of those involved in direct selling are women. In Canada, it's over 90%. I can't get figures for Ireland yet. We usually get rolled in with the UK, although, about 100 years ago, we had quite an aggressive stance on that. So about 77% through most of Europe as well. There are more and more MLMs that focus on men, and I think we talked a little bit yesterday evening about Forex and crypto being particularly focused on young men. But in general, this industry is a women's industry. My last publication was on women using group consumption to combat loneliness. And I think that this really is something relevant that's linked to MLM. Loneliness has been called the modern epidemic, and there are studies that show that women are lonelier than men. Particularly, this has to do with liminal zones. That's where we talk about people's identity being in flux. A big one would be new motherhood. You leave the identity that you had behind and become this new person, but also high school graduates, college graduates, immigrants, so people who have moved away from their traditional support network and are now looking for a new one. And what we find is that selling sorority or sisterhood is extremely powerful. So my concerns that I'd like to discuss today are around the co-opting of feminist language and messaging while promoting a very regressive image of gender. MLM obviously has sort of two different strands of advertising for both recruitment and sales. The top-down advertising from corporate tends to focus very strongly on empowerment and having it all. And we could argue whether that's femvertising or woke washing. But what I'm more interested in is that because of the structure of MLMs, there are also non-corporate comms. This would link closely back to Claudia Grouse's work that she showed us yesterday about the structure of the organization. And these messages, these non-corporate comms, tend to promote a far more regressive vision of femininity, while still reflecting the empowerment that we see in the more polished corporate communications. Sullivan and Delaney in 2006 referred to MLMs as selling an entrepreneurial femininity. Again, some of the talk last night was around these hashtags of mom boss, mom life, CEO mom, the almost ubiquitous and heavily parodied at this stage hashtag boss babe, also references to hashtag sisterhood and hashtag empowering women. Not to single out one organization, but just if you click on the unique homepage, the first thing that comes up is uplift, empower, validate. So this is a messaging that is coming from corporate, this entrepreneurial femininity. But I'd like to take a closer look at the empowerment on offer. And there are sort of 4 or 5 themes that I've pulled out of some of the marketing messages that we see around mom shaming, body shaming, humiliation, and self-objectification. Mom shaming is an extremely common tactic for recruitment. Sorry, I should specify, sorry, these are common tropes in advertising and recruiting. They're illustrative examples that I'm going to show you. They're taken both from anti-MLM and from searching by hashtags. I'm not going to go deeply into the ethnographic method and how I do my research, but these are not meant to be definitive, but there are enough of these messages out there that I feel these form an important part of the discourse. So that's my sort of disclaimer here. So the first one is mom shaming, and I see this very commonly for recruitment. There are a lot of messages sent out that stress that the only way to be a good mother is to work from home, and that love for your children is expressed through participation in the MLM. For sales, we see women's messages saying that women don't care about their families, essentially, if they allow their children to eat non-organic or processed foods, or don't use clean household products. This would include things like Thieves Oil Cleaner. It's commonly sold as like a clean alternative to chemical bleach. Obviously, as someone with a degree in chemistry, I question how you can have anything that isn't chemical, but this is an example of an ad that's appeared several times, populating throughout the network around the internet. It's not clear that this is a corporate image, although it obviously includes the branding for a particular corporation. Be there when the bell rings. And this is fairly benign, but this rapidly leads to things like referring to mothers who work outside the home as a part-time mom, and referring to mothers who do MLM and work in the home as a present mom, or indeed a yes mom who can provide their child with everything they need because of their labor in the MLM. Body shaming is often linked to mom shaming, particularly for postpartum bodies. These are obviously particularly related to weight loss and health MLMs. And we also see, because of the emphasis on cold messaging, and we've seen quite recently discussions in the Direct Selling Association's own literature about hunting for prospects. You're cold messaging people if you do not know their history with their weight and body image. You are potentially triggering very vulnerable people, and we do see people speaking about being upset, having former eating disorders and being upset by these messages. The one on the left I find particularly gross. How are you still single? You're so pretty, you're so funny, you're so smart. Well, apparently men will have no chance if you get your body wraps, which will help you slim down your stomach fat. This one from Beachbody is much less problematic, obviously, but again, it's show how this mama lost 25 pounds from home. This is from a Facebook post, and it talks about an expectant mother and the experience she had when she had her first child. I'm about to have a baby. It was a really hard time for me last baby. She felt she had a target on her back. I'm going to be self-conscious about my body shape. Do not try to sell me wraps or supplements or Beachbody. Clearly, I'm going to lose a lot of sleep. I don't want Thrive, keto coffee, etc. I'm going to lose my hair. I don't want Monat or any type of vitamins for that. I'm going to look exhausted, hormonal mess. Basically, if you use my postpartum anxiety as a marketing opportunity, I will not hesitate to cut you out of my life right now. And a common narrative, especially in the anti-MLM groups, is people who feel that they were targeted immediately postpartum. This is an example of someone being asked to join a fitness boot camp, often linked to Beachbody, but we don't have an actual name here of this, what the seller was selling. But this was reportedly 9 days postpartum. So for any members of the audience who have had a baby, I can't imagine you'd be ready to join a fitness boot camp 9 days later. This one I'm including just because it's so strange. The idea that a baby would need carb inhibitor fat fighters and love them, when a baby's whole job in life is basically to put on weight. It doesn't really have a particular relevance here. I just thought it was so strange. Another theme that I fully understand is meant to be a joke, but in many cases, I guess, men in financial control and women tricking men out of their money. It's heteronormative, obviously, but it also suggests this extreme patriarchy within the family. For an example, go online during the Super Bowl, sellers from multiple companies will post ads implying that as your husbands are distracted, now is the time to shop. We see sellers offering to package purchases as prizes to hide them from your husband. And it suggests this unhealthy relationship where women are hiding purchases from a financially controlling breadwinner husband. Again, much of this is meant in a lighthearted way, but it can be internalized if it is repeated over and over, which it is. And we do see things like sellers who have stickers saying prize. So this is an example of a LuLaRoe post. How do you rate your LuLaRoe addiction? My husband cut me off. This is such a common trope in LuLaRoe marketing that it's called #LulaJail. So again, this one, my husband took away my credit cards. My sister really needs to stop having her packages delivered here. If her husband knew how many there were, he'd be mad. I know, right? Types my sister's name into my shipping info on my order. So we have two couples with this very unhealthy relationship in this narrative. Again, this one is about recruiting unique presenters, and stage 4 is my husband took all my credit cards. Stage 5 is becomes a presenter. This one again, when your husband says don't buy any more makeup, if you need an alibi in your package in the form of congratulations on winning this item. And I have seen again online sellers having stickers ready to say this is a gift or so on. Self-humiliation is the sales tactic of embarrassing yourself to get sales. As a woman in her 30s, I have to be the target audience for many of these products. I cannot say that having someone smash a pie on someone's face or crack an egg on their head has ever encouraged me to buy literally anything. It's a very strange sales technique, but we see it quite widely across these sellers. So this one, it seems to be something that unique sellers do particularly. So this one's from 3 mascara orders. I will pour a cup of water on my head. 5 mascara orders. I will splat an egg on my head. 7 mascara orders. I will dump a bag of flour on my head. 10 mascara orders. I do all 3. The reason I put the other one in next to it is because I like the fact that someone else has come along and tagged the website with uplift, empower, validate right underneath their message about making a cake on their head, essentially. This one's a little bit more worrying because it's a charcoal mask, which if you have oily skin, fantastic, it'll really dry up your skin. The issue is that these people are leaving it on all day until they sell 100 or 55 charcoal masks themselves. So that's going to do some serious damage to your moisture barrier and lead to a lot of pain and suffering afterwards. I'm including this one in self-humiliation because it's how it's positioned. This is the idea that it's so subversive or crazy to put makeup on your husband as part of your sales technique. I've included a brief list of some of the top makeup gurus on YouTube who are largely men. We could talk about the glass elevator later. But this woman's husband, for example, needed a few beers to get through it. He's a real trooper because it's so humiliating, I guess, for a man to put on makeup. I'm going to put a content warning on the next one. The next slide does discuss oral sex, just so people know. So the claim that lip sense is blowjob proof is widespread. The picture on the left obviously is more graphic, but the one on the right, which says, sorry, I have to move my little box, which says, he said, prove that it's smudge proof and you can order whatever you want, is actually slightly more worrying because it suggests that financial control is being traded for sex. So hashtag empowerment indeed. So we have mom shaming, body shaming, humiliation, ultra-traditional gender roles, possibly bordering on control or abuse. And we're claiming this is about empowerment and sisterhood. Expressing concerns about these practices is suggested to be anti-feminist because it is gendered work. And we can see from this post about somebody planning to get to the top 1% of their business that what it takes is a made-up mind and a decided heart. And I think this links to what Eric was saying. Anyone with questions or concerns is negative and they are actively preventing your success. So they are called dream stealers, they are called neg ferrets, and they are called energy suckers. This is very much popularized by The Secret, the law of attraction, which suggests that you put out into the world positive things and positive things will come back to you. But this is quickly corrupted into attraction marketing, referenced in multi-level marketing coaching, and it quickly becomes toxic positivity and a tool that basically short circuits your critical thinking skills. Thinking about where this narrative might come from, LuLaRoe was one of the only multi-level marketing companies that responded to my article in The Conversation. Again, we had people talking yesterday about how hard it is to get a comment from people. And again, they immediately suggest that people who failed at LuLaRoe hadn't put in the required effort. It makes it very difficult for people to extricate themselves from this mindset of toxic positivity. And I think the humiliation aspect creates a sunk cost fallacy. If you want to leave the MLM, did I do all this for nothing? Did I potentially alienate my friends with mom shaming, body shaming? Did I smash eggs on my head and destroy my skin's moisture barrier? Did I post pictures of myself before and after giving a blowjob for nothing? That is the end of my presentation. I hope the translators were able to keep up because I spoke very quickly. Anyone who wants to contact me, it's moira.o'sullivan@cit.ie, and I would love to chat to people about this.
Thank you so much, Moira. That was really an impressive presentation and very helpful. Our next panelist is Dr. Elizabeth Villagomez, and I hope to see her on screen soon. Dr. Villagomez is an economist who, among other things, she has worked for the United Nations. She has worked for the European Union Commission and Parliament, and she has worked for the European Institute for Gender Equality. And again, Elizabeth, are you there?
I am, but it says that the host has stopped my video. So
Let me
if
fix
the
that.
host, start my video. There we go. All right. Hello. Hello, everybody. I am really so pleased to be here today and in this really impressive panel. It says that somebody stopped my video. But anyway, I will start talking so I don't
we see you, Elizabeth, we see you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So rather than a formal presentation, I would like just to make some points about academic and journalistic work that I have read, as well as some conclusions from listening very intently yesterday and today about the damage that MLMs have done on people's lives. And also focusing very much on women, just like Moira did. And thank you, Moira, for that presentation. It was amazing. My point of view is from this level of what are women's situation around the world and why, they become such easy targets for MLMs. Now, how do women then join and why women join MLMs is, in my understanding, because women are more vulnerable to fall into these types of schemes. First of all, one of the first things I can say is that we know that women face a wage gap worldwide, which is around 20% on average, although in some countries it could be much higher. In some countries now it's only like 1%. They have done their work, and women, almost in every single category have the same wages as men. But number two, which is something that Moira very clearly explained, is that all over the world, we also have the data that show that care responsibilities are still very much women's work. And this, of course, limits how much time they can dedicate to paid work. And also, even if we look at time use surveys around the world, it also limits their physical space. In other words, women, do not have jobs that have long commutes in much less proportions than men, etc. So this means that when MLMs target and present the possibility to women of contributing to the household income, but also, as we see also a big trend across the world of the increasing numbers of single parent households, most of them being headed by women, and that these women are likely to have lower paid or low paid jobs or part-time jobs. The offer made by someone near to them, who's a friend, who's a relative, or in a setting of a home, or in a wild recruiting event, indeed seems like too good to miss. It is no wonder then, as we saw before, the MLM workforce is around 75% women. There have been sociological studies showing that MLMs have centered on women as sellers and consumers. It's no wonder that 64% of all MLM products are in the wellness and cosmetics categories, where exaggeration of the qualities and benefits of these products also have a larger room. And as we saw, you're going to have these amazing lipstick, or you're going to have, this magic powder that will make you lose weight, etc., etc. So the physical constraints of women to their homes as carers, I think, has really opened the door to enter the homes and provide incentives to women to become part of this MLM sales force. And I want to tell you a little story because I find it fascinating. Tupperware, which is one of the most famous MLMs, threw the inventor of the Tupperware party out once she had unlocked the secret to recruiting women downstream to work for her, and eventually became an executive at the company. The name of this woman was Brownie Weiss. She had previously been a stand-home seller, where she was told flat out that she could not ever become an executive in spite of her gift for recruiting and selling at home parties in particular, which of course, in the case of stand-home, were mob demonstrations. Although the advent of Tupperware was truly perhaps a unique product in its beginnings, the recruitment of more distributors was definitely the key. You could say that some grooming took place as these new sellers were pampered with gifts and received inspirational letters of encouragement and even training. It is interesting to read that some of the accounts of her time and success and at Tupperware, which is really interesting. It says, part of the power of Weiss's sales technique, which at times seemed more faith than business, was that it gave the impression that the sky was the limit and it relied on collective power. Another account reads, no woman got praised for scrubbing floors, but when they got praised for selling Tupperware, they had something to be proud of. And indeed, this is exactly what Moira has explained in an excellent way. So it is very clear from my point of view that tapping into the emotions of women, their socially determined roles, their gender roles, and their spatial and physical constraints made them perfect subjects for pyramidal schemes, but also at the same time limits the growth of these schemes. And this is why I think this is one of the reasons why this eternal recruiting, of course, because it's part of the scheme, but in the case of women, it's even stronger. Although some sociologists do credit, of course, MLMs for giving many women in the day, not now, but in the day, perhaps also their first opportunity to make some money, to contribute to the household income, etc. It's clear that the industry, since its very beginnings, saw this and continues to exploit it. I'm just going to talk a little bit about more of this woman, because it also shows how a woman who becomes successful in this area is treated by the industry. She was the very first woman to come out in the cover of Business Week. And she, in that article in Business Week, she was credited for her sales technique and the reason to why Tupperware had reached $25 million in sales back in the day. And of course, this discredited her male boss. They don't tell us much of the detail of why Weiss was booted out of Tupperware, but it did. What we do know is that the sales eventually did dwindle, which is, of course, as we saw, the typical outcome of a collapse of a pyramid scheme. And some big distributors left, probably to start their own schemes. And she was fired with very little compensation after the model she helped to create. Now, yesterday, we also talked about the situation in developing countries. And I know that many people here are from the Philippines that I have been reading on the question and answer. And they're, of course, very worried about what's going on in their countries. Also yesterday from the Balkan countries. And in developing countries, as we stated yesterday, these constraints are even more intense for women. So this includes women, of course, who migrate to other countries and are expected to send home money. And at the current stage of globalization, open markets and free trade agreements, the basis for the pyramid schemes, of course, are unemployed people, incomeless people, or working poor people. And among all of those, especially women who have many family responsibilities, and they don't have the opportunity, especially in these developing countries, to open up traditional businesses. Although yesterday it was said that, this is a trick in the States to show to people that it's cheaper or better to open up a business in MLM than any other business. I have to remind you that, of course, in most countries outside the US or developing countries, opening up a business is quite an ordeal. So, they also, there's people who face numerous obstacles to accessing and maintaining well, protected wage work. So it's not surprise at the end of the day that American Multi-Level Marketing Association has family first as one of its values. And this is, I think, very much reflected in everything that Moira showed us previously. There's a very interesting sociological studies on MLM, particularly, this is kind of old, but by Maureen Connolly and Patricia Rothon. And they were able to, back in 1988, but they were able to obtain information through sociological interview techniques to obtain information about the motivation of women in this type of activity, their satisfaction, and the problems they faced in this MLM world. And so it was really interesting what the interviews that they recorded came up with. One of them, the study definitely shows, for example, they compare Amway to Mary Kay. And of course, while we see that Mary Kay was very much patriarchal and the wives could only enter if their husbands had entered, so on and so forth, Mary Kay followed this pattern of care of clients, calling the women, the consultants, mothers, and the newcomers, babies or children, and so forth. So everything keeping this thing of that you're in a family, you're in a bigger family now. We're going to take care of you, right? And Amway, for example, and nobody has talked about this, actually made their newcomers purge their homes of products that were not Amway. So everything had to be Amway, all the soaps, all the cleaning products, etc. So it was openly accepted back then that it was not only a question of getting customers to consume more, but that the families consuming at least 100%, $100 back then were integrated into the fold of the family, of the Amway family. And it's really interesting that when the sociologists asked the women about recruiting others, the women became very uncomfortable. The women became kind of offstandish and didn't want to talk about it. So they did feel that this was sort of an exploitation of others, and they did not want to directly address it. But I think that although most of the women interviewed did appreciate the possibility of working flexibly to balance their work life, et cetera, the companies do impose a certain dress code and presentation code that is promoted, just as Moira said, as positive attitudes. And in both cases, the argument used in the materials that these sociologists actually looked at was to attract people by fanciful ideas about, obtaining the ideal house or the vacation of a lifetime. In an Amway presentation at the end of the 60 minutes, a video concluded, what they sell really is the hope of making you rich beyond your most crazy dreams. So it's obvious that this is always something that the MLMs tap into. I'd like to share with you finally a more recent sociological study in Ecuador that shows very similar patterns. In fact, you could even think that these companies have in fact empowered women to some degree, unless and until one addresses the issue of the push for recruitment, of recruiting others, either because women are more reluctant or even if they take to the task with a passion, their overall weaker social situation pushes their efforts into, in this case, the sociologist was looking at the most successful direct selling or MLM in South America, which is called Yambal, which is a cosmetics company. And they really find the celebration of flexibility and the recruiting rhetoric that they also use, saying that women's have finally achieved, what thought they couldn't do, which is balancing work and family life. Of course, in these countries, the amount of care is much more concentrated. And just to finalize, I'd like to tell you how the article is titled. The title is called "The Women Multiply Themselves," in the sense that they carry double and even triple burdens. And the main conclusion here is that the involvement in these MLMs has not brought about empowerment, but has actually increased their burden of care and increased the tensions even within their homes. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. And I should have said when I introduced you that Elizabeth has been doing a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes to make this conference a success, including arranging for the simultaneous translation into Spanish for the full 2 days of the conference. And we're very grateful about that. And thanks again. Our next guest is Dr. Stephen Hassan, and I hope to get him on the screen soon. Let's just see.
Hello.
There you are.
Hi.
Hi, Steve.
What a wonderful. Oh, you're going to say something?
I just wanted to say, Steve, maybe I don't need to say this, but he is one of the world's experts on cults and undue influence, including issues involving multi-level marketing. He has written many books, most recently, The Cult of Trump. And I'll recommend that to everybody, although it's not strictly multi-level marketing. But Steve, thanks very much for being here, and we're all looking forward to what you have to say.
Thank you, Douglas. Thank you, William Keep, and Moira, and Elizabeth, and all the people who did this amazing conference. Are you able to see me?
Yes, we can see you.
You bet.
Okay. Thank you for this amazing conference, this incredible panel. I'm very honored to be part of this. And I wanted to start with a quote from Victor Hugo, that nothing is as powerful as an idea whose time has come. And I feel like this 2-day conference is bringing together some of the people, Bruce Craig, who's been doing this for decades, Robert Fitzpatrick, and others who've been doing this work for decades. And I do think, I think it was Bruce Craig who said he thought there could be legislation that could address the issues. And I've switched my slides to accommodate everything I've learned yesterday and today. So with that, I want to start by just saying I've been a licensed mental health counselor for almost 3 decades. And I've been at this work for 45 years. I'm getting to be old. I'm sharing my screen now. Can everyone see my screen? Is that a yes? I hope. So essentially about 5 years ago, I got involved with a forensic think tank at Harvard Medical School called the Program in Psychiatry and the Law. And I realized after so many years of activism, the real problem was the law itself was out of date. It had a very out-of-date notion of human consciousness, of social psychology, of neuroscience. And essentially one of the professors there said, this is really important. You should go get a doctorate and you should do some quantitative research on your bite model and I'll help you. So now I'm a graduate and I started my first slide with the title of my dissertation. And I'll read it: The Bite Model of Authoritarian Control, Undue Influence, Thought Reform, Brainwashing, Mind Control, Trafficking, and the Law. And I put it all together because really what we're discussing is influence. And there has not been clarity in the law, except if you're a minor or an elderly person, about the whole issue of undue influence. And so I also want to just comment that I have a website, freedomofmind.com, that has a lot of blogs and video links, course, and freedomfromundueinfluence.org is the nonprofit entity for my research. So without further ado, this is my former cult leader, Sun Myung Moon, being crowned the Messiah at the Senate Dirksen office building by Congress people. He died, she's running the cult, but most people know of the Moonies as the cult where Moon would arrange total strangers, tell them they're going to be married, and they agree to get married. And I think he did 30,000 couples at one time. But I was a fanatic. I had dropped out of school, quit my job, donated my bank account, spent 2.5 years until my own deprogramming, at which point, and I should say Chinese Communist brainwashing criteria of Robert Lifton was instrumental in helping me to realize what had happened to my mind. And when I got out, I was like, how did this happen? I really want to understand it. So I don't have a lot of time. I'm going to go forward with what I think is a critically important model that was developed by law professor emeritus Alan Shefflin, called the Socialite influence model. It is included in my dissertation in detail. And at the bottom of this slide, I have the actual page of my dissertation. My dissertation is, by the way, on ProQuest for free, and it's also on my website. But the key points here that I want to focus on first is this is a framework or a structure for expert witnesses to go before a judge and jury and to kind of break down everything from the influencer to the influencee. And of course, influencees, my girlfriend had dumped me, 3 women recruited me, flirting with me. But different influencees have life vulnerabilities, death of a loved one, illness, graduation, losing a job, moving to a new city, state, or country. There's a lot of life cycle events that make people situationally vulnerable. So all of that needs to be considered. But the influencer, do they have a position of authority, their motives, their purpose, the techniques that are being used, which I'll get into in a moment with my work, and the context, the timing and the setting, and the results. The law has been particularly focused on money and property as harm, and has really ignored the psychological harm caused by involvement with an MLM cult. And I agree with Robert Fitzpatrick. I think of MLMs as a commercial cult. And next to it, and under commercial cult, in my thinking, is trafficking, sex and labor trafficking, by the way. But this is a very important frame if you're a lawyer, if you're involved with doing expert witness work. I invite you to look into Shefflin's model. I just did an interview with him for a future blog that will be coming out next week. My next slide is from the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association, which is kind of the guidebook for psychiatrists, psychologists, and other mental health professionals for how to assess or identify and assess and do research on particular problems and disorders. And I wanted to bring everyone's attention to the fact that this has been in not only the DSM-5, but the 4 and the 3. Individuals who've been subjected to intense coercive persuasion, for example, brainwashing, thought reform, indoctrination while captive, torture, long-term political imprisonment, recruitment by sects or cults, or by terror organizations, and they may present with prolonged changes in or conscious questioning of their identity. And for decades, I have been approached by victims of MLMs, people who have suffered tremendously, confusion, disorientation, can't sleep, panic disorder, confusion about their entire existence and their life, some of them in quite grave danger because they ran out of all their money, their wife left them or their husband left them. So I know this phenomenon very, very well. I should also say, like within 3 months of my deprogramming from the Moonies in 1976, an ex-Moonie tried to get me into Amway. It was like, I've been around this for a really long time. The other thing is that families have come and hired me to help a loved one who's gotten sucked down the rabbit hole of MLM world. So I have a very personal and professional experience with this. And the simplest way of describing it, and this is just a model, but there was the real Stephen Hassan and then the Mooney Stephen Hassan that got created that controlled the real Stephen Hassan. Didn't erase the real Stephen Hassan, just suppressed real Stephen Hassan. And it was after my deprogramming that the real me came out again. And Douglas talked about the big turnover rate in people who don't get sucked all the way in for more than a few months or maybe a year, because they realize that this really sucks. The pressure, the stress, the guilt, the indoctrination. Moving along, because I see my time is elapsing quickly. This is one of the most important slides. It is on my freedomofmind.com website. You can download the PDF. But I really want people to understand there is a way to sort ethical influence from unethical influence. For example, ethical influence implies informed consent, which is a very important legal construct. And when we've been listening to all the descriptions of MLMs, the universal is deception, which I'll get into in a follow-up slide. So in this model, I talk about critical variables for individuals, for leaders and unhealthy leaders, as well as organizations. I'm going to speed up so I don't go over my 15 minutes. But in my research, I took all of the mind control models and I reorganized it in a simplistic way, it's not simplistic, but simple way. Behavior control variables, information control variables, thought control of variables, and emotion control variables. And there's a whole long laundry list of some 15 to 25 under each of these things. It's again on my website in its complete mode. I just put a few things here with MLM focus, invest a lot of hours in self-indoctrination as well as going to meetings and conventions, spending tons of time. People often are not sleeping properly. They're being exploited financially. There's a lot of behavior modification techniques, positive reinforcement as well as punishment. Commitment is required. If you want to be a success, then you have to commit. But the goal of behavior control is to instill dependency and obedience on the group. And I should say, cults, if I can go back to this one slide, cults exist on this continuum. In my opinion, you can have benign cults or even productive cults, but you know what you're getting into. You're free to ask questions. You can talk to whoever you want to talk to, and you can leave without punishment or high cost, versus authoritarian destructive cults, which is what I think MLMs fall under. Information control. Information are the tools we use to think. And so withholding vital information, distorting it, outright lying, you're not allowed to talk negatively. You can only talk with your upline. You're not allowed to talk to former members and critics, and if you do, you're punished. Thought control, beliefs and ideology is the truth. The heavy emphasis on you gotta believe, the magical thinking. Doubts are evil. A lot of hypnotic techniques and something called neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, that I write about in my work. Another element of thought control is loaded language. So a business opportunity or dream stealers is a loaded term for anyone who raises questions about it. I'm going to speed up because I'm running out of time. Emotional control. So you feel special and you're part of a community, but really it's about phobias, irrational fears that are put into your mind that if you don't do what they tell you to do, you're a terrible person, you're a failure. And Eric and others in this conference have talked about how, there's no positive way to leave unless you understand mind control and you exit. So I really encourage people to check out my doctoral dissertation, which is 165 pages or so, but I have a 30-minute video presentation from my oral review, if you like videos, summarizing my quantitative research on the BITE model. I threw in a slide on trafficking. Trafficking is a federal law. It's an international law. And that's I have to stop. Fraud, force, and coercion, and where it overlaps with MLM is psychological manipulation. And I have been contacted by the Department of Labor in terms of labor trafficking, as they've been using my BITE model to help explain how people can be recruited. And with that, sorry, Doug, if I went a minute over. Thank you.
No, you did. My timer must be slower than yours. So
great. There's so much more resources. There's so much more to learn, but I really want to put the spotlight on the psychological harm that's caused people who get sucked into these groups. And it's not fair. It's not right. And I do think there are legislative cures if we can get the political will to go up against the wealthy lobbies. Thank you.
thanks. And if you would stop your screen sharing and then stay on, and let's bring back the other panelists. I believe it's Dr. Barrett has been, Steve Barrett has been monitoring the Q&A. So Steve, why don't you? I'm sure there are a lot of questions, and let's see if we can handle some of them.
Okay, the question to Eric Scheidler. The questioner says that you seem to have disappeared for about 10 years. Is that so, and why?
I'm still here.
Okay. I don't know what he meant.
I'm alive and well. This is economically dangerous to speak out against MLMs. I was sued twice, once into bankruptcy. Never got a penny in judgment against me, but you can be buried in tens and tens of thousands of dollars of legal bills pretty quickly. There's another really interesting question in the chat I would like to address, though. It says, there any documents that distributors sign that restrict their rights or their abilities? And that's a big part of this, the trap that Doug Brooks especially is well aware of, is multi-level marketing organizations. Often the first thing that a recruited distributor investor does is signs a non-disclosure agreement, or it's an arbitration agreement with a non-disclosure caveat in it. So the people doing this within MLMs know they're defrauding new investors, and the first thing they do is get them to sign an arbitration agreement with a non-disclosure in it. So if you do have you want to take legal action, you can't talk about it, and you can't talk to other victims, and you're essentially silenced, and you cannot speak about your experience or the elements of the arbitration, the legal action itself. So law firms are having to break these to have successful class actions. And they have. I consulted on one that resulted in a $155 million judgment. But it's pretty insidious that this is done. It's the very first thing that's done to victims as they start to invest.
It's a good point. This is a whole topic for another session. Would be the contracts that distributors sign. Because they are very sophisticated commercial agreements, but they're presented as this is a standard form. Don't worry about it, and the person has really already been sold on the whole thing. But these arbitration clauses, not only the arbitration clauses, they're also waiver of class action clauses, so that in a number of recent class actions, not cases that I've been involved with personally, but they have gone south because the distributors signed these class action waivers, so that the people just don't know what they're getting into when they sign these contracts.
Absolutely.
Okay, another question. Is there a right way to do MLM? That was a question. Okay.
I put myself through my undergrad doing sales. At one point, I believe I was the top seller of Puma shoes in Southern California and Arizona. I think that once, my personal opinion, not an economist, once you start introducing rewards for recruiting, including proportions of people's sales, you start to cross a line that has a potential to become a pyramid immediately.
And also part of the recruiting now, and this has been this is not decades old, but it continues, is this isn't like the bad one. We're a new one. We're better. We're the most Christian. We're the fastest growing. It's ground level. It's the most profitable, the most Christian, and the most ethical. And it's usually a rehash of everything that's been done for the last 3 or 4 decades.
Can I add something in, Stephen, quickly? And that is, I deal with a lot of authoritarian cults, and MLMs are everywhere in the major religious cults that are out there. And it's just another element. Eric just mentioned about the religious piece of it, but there's a lot there that is of great concern.
There were a lot of questions about and expressions of feeling that something needs to be done and what can be done. And so there were a series of suggestions or questions as to whether certain things might be effective. One was, would it be effective to try to get attorneys general to do more tax record studies when filing complaints? Can consumers encourage more of these studies? Is there a way to do that?
You know, I'm thinking that may have been a question that was directed at Bruce Craig in the prior panel, because Bruce, in fact, I think Bruce is the only lawyer I've known that has done this. He's gotten the actual tax returns, and I mean, I'd love to see some regulator do that again, because I think it would be very revealing. But
okay. It's on the same theme as the others. It's different, specific. Another person, several people asked, is there a way to legislate recruiting out of the picture? Could laws be passed that would make recruiting somehow illegal, or that's the question.
I think the key thing is whether or not there's honest, informed consent given, that where people know exactly what they're getting into. And what Eric brought up and Doug about the NDAs is crucial. People need to get educated about how these legal documents are being slipped in, and then they're used to squash people's freedom to whistleblow, to do litigation. So the key for me is honest disclosure. And as soon as the real facts are given, nobody's going to want to get involved.
Maybe it would be useful to, on some of our websites, to have a very simple document saying, these are the things that are not being disclosed, or you can look for these. I don't know if anyone has done that. Okay.
Well, there's two things. One would be a fair and accurate disclosure, which is net income. What is the net income of distributors after all expenses? They don't disclose that ever. I think that would be absolutely critical. And people actually need to know, can I sell this? Like if you eliminated recruitment and they were direct sales and you just had to make money selling the product, you'd find out it's an impossibility. I went on eBay this morning. There's 46,000 listings for women trying to unload Mary Kay product that they stocked up. And some of the highest ones are $3,000 worth of inventory and $1,000 and down to smaller lots, but there's 46,000 listings this morning. I mean, that tells you about the real market value if you have to buy and sell this.
I think that's a very good point. And I hope, again, that we can get that onto some of our websites in the form of an article or a notice. Somebody asked whether it's feasible or what can be done to create a global force to confront MLMs. In other words, more coordination. I'm not sure what kind of global force, but someone's asking about that. what can be done, I guess, to coordinate what we're doing?
I don't know if they were here yesterday. I couldn't see them on the attendees, but I'm certainly going to send them, especially the two first panels yesterday that were more on the legal and the regulation of this, because I sent in the invitation out to the United Nations Commission on Trade and Development. Now, this is a very important commission of the UN, because what it does, and just so people know, a lot of people have misunderstandings of what the UN is. The United Nations is not an NGO. It is the group of all the countries in the world that have come together, and basically they try to work through conflicts between nations. Sometimes they don't do such a good job, but they do do a good job in helping developing nations, for example, develop their legal frameworks. So I think that in this sense, definitely, I think this body could really help. I talked directly to the person in charge of consumer protection, so he was very interested. I don't know if he was in for a while yesterday or something, but definitely I think he's in Geneva. So in any case, yes, there could be a global issue, and I think that now the movement itself, I think the anti-MLM movement is just keeps growing, right? So I think that this is also a very good sign. As far as legalities go, I think that's one of the things that could happen, you know, that the UN takes some interest in this, although unfortunately Herbalife was just admitted into the Global Compact. And I complained, I have sent them several messages, they haven't responded.
Elizabeth, if I can add, in terms of the UN, if people haven't read the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a document, and as a former MLM, you really should, because it's a great, perfect. It really is a very powerful, important document that's guided my work over the 4.5 decades.
I really believe that MLMs do infringe on many of these human rights, and they have. This has not been up. Why? Because the U.S., I think, with international instruments, it's not so strong. But definitely, this can be pushed at the level of the rest of nations who have signed several human rights agreements. Yeah.
Great.
Somebody asked whether anyone has any tips on how to approach people in MLMs to encourage them to self-educate or to exit without being patronizing.
Well, that sounds like my work.
That is.
I wrote a book called Freedom of Mind, How to Help a Loved One with Controlling Beliefs and Cults and People. So what, and this applies to any cult, I might add. What you don't want to do is try to argue facts or attack the person or say they're stupid or ignorant or whatever. You want to engage them, develop rapport and trust, and find out their story, how they got recruited and what they thought they were getting into and how long they've been doing it, and kind of use their own narrative to ask questions that provoke and empower the person to think for themselves. And if you're a former member of the Moonies, like I am, I get to share my story about how I was deceived into it. And I talk about the behavior and information and thought and emotional control elements, and ask them if they ever felt like they wanted to tell somebody, but they couldn't, you know, their doubts or their concerns, or that they wanted to read an article that was written about their group, but they were discouraged. So but the whole thing is not a win-lose frame. It's a let's seek the truth frame together. And if this opportunity is so great, convince me frame.
Okay.
That's my short answer.
Couple questions about social media. Is there a way to start a social media movement that will unfriend anybody promoting MLMs? Is there anything that can be done about social media taking action against MLMs?
Well, I'm part of us. I'm going to add, forgive me if I'm talking too much, but a bunch of my colleagues are doing a I Got Out hashtag social media movement to try to destigmatize the shame and embarrassment of having been tricked into one of these authoritarian groups. I think that will help. I'm categorically against cancel culture and blocking family members and friends. If they're in trouble, they need contact with normal people to
Absolutely.
engage with them.
I think was it Jane Marie yesterday? Somebody on the journalists panel said something like, if we can't get Facebook to take action on actual genocides, what are the chances that they're going to take action on MLM? I think, as we saw from one of the posts that I posted, there are people out there threatening to unfriend people if they the term that's used in the anti-MLM literature is hunzone them. But we also see, there was a recent publication from the Direct Selling Journal talking about how to befriend people on the internet to then pitch your product to them. So it's still a tactic that's being promoted.
One person asked if you could talk a little bit more about how couple distributors are used in recruitment.
What was the word?
Couple, husband and wife, or partners, or two. Yeah.
Eric, wasn't that a big, when you were in your
Yeah, absolutely. That was really big, because the husband and the husband usually talking more about the financial aspect and the financial blessings that would come from this opportunity, and the wife would talk about how great their marriage has become, and that the participation in that, whatever the specific MLM is, transformed their marriage and made her husband more kind and more loving, and they have the marriage now they would have never had without this. So they're and again, it's not accurate. Steve could go an hour on just this topic, I'm sure. But yes, that was very popular in ones that aren't just women centric, that tend to try to engage both parts of the couple.
Okay, we have a request that
dovetails with what Moira was telling us earlier about the sort of manipulating. It's sort of, I guess it's what Eric talked about. I mean, Eric's experience goes back to the 1980s and 90s, right? But you're bringing us up to the 21st century, and it's sort of the same thing, but turbocharged.
And I think there was a podcast or documentary about ex-LuLaRoe sellers, and they stressed that, like, the family unit and the couple was a large part of that. And I believe one woman said that she sort of stopped being invited to retreats once she was like, I'm single, I don't have a partner to bring to this retreat. That it was that couple focused. So it's an interesting tactic. I don't know.
And even back then, they talked about using sex as a tool to inspire your husband, and especially in the UK, women would joke about their little black dress. That was their special inspirational dress, I guess. So that's just being rehashed.
okay, a few people asked questions or pleaded to make what's been presented at the conference available. We can talk about, I guess, remind everybody that it will be. But another person said she'd love to have all of you on my podcast. Is there a way you can make contact information to the panelists available to somebody who wants to contact them or interview them?
So on the website, there is a panelists page, and anyone who provided me with a website, a personal website, or a contact link, that should be available there.
Okay.
And if any of the panelists want to come back and give me contact information now, I can add that very quickly.
Yeah, we'll look into that, and then as in terms of, maybe I misheard the question, but in terms of having, the conference is going to be available on Vimeo. If you go to the website, conference website, there'll be, and this will be maybe in a week or so, each session will be available
Okay, and I hope that
The
things like,
rate limiting factor is that I start jury duty next week. So how big a trial I get is how fast it'll come up.
okay, people also hope that they could have simple access to the slides, some of the slides, rather than having to go through the whole video to, to see them as they were presented.
Yeah, we can definitely have a chat about that too.
And I think a lot of the questions, Steve, seem to boil down to what can we do? And I think there's two things. I think there's definitely been a shift at the Federal Trade Commission, which I think will be instrumental in addressing these and hopefully stopping these. And I also think there's a $1 billion judgment waiting to be had. I think a national class action firm that lands the first really big striking judgment against this industry can that more than anything will set up real effective change.
I think
A lot of people, sorry, a lot of people were asking about that yesterday. And I guess if we can give any advice at all is like, look for these class suits online and maybe you can sign up too. If you have been cheated and,
And in the meantime, preventive education for everybody, because the people think they're invulnerable to being taken into a mind control cult. And the news is we're human, and we've been going through a pandemic and an economic crisis. We're all vulnerable. So educating yourself and your loved ones is the best effective way in the long run to stop this type of abuse.
I hope
I actually, sorry, I saw that as a question actually pop up. Are there some people who are more vulnerable to this than others? And absolutely, if you're in a vulnerable space, but that, that could be that you've just had a baby, your friends are going out to the bars or whatever, and you're like, oh, I guess I need some mom friends now. And that puts you in that vulnerable space immediately. It could be that you've left your hometown and gone to a big university and are feeling a little bit cut off from the world. It could be that you just finished university and you're like, oh, what do I do with my life now? Am I supposed to be a grown up? It could be that you emigrate to another country. I've been an immigrant in a foreign country myself. It's very isolating. These sorts of positions. It may just be as simple as maybe my friends left the hometown and I've been left behind. It might not be any change in your life. It could be a change in other people's lives. And I think Steve has really talked about this too, about just finding yourself in that position of vulnerability. And it can be from somebody who's very, sees themselves as very mentally strong and very powerful and yeah.
Yeah, and your best protection if someone's recruiting is ask hard questions and get an answer. And the one I love, Eric, that you told me, ask for 3 years of tax returns. If the guy's telling you they need millions,
Yeah,
if they're not willing to pony up the actual numbers, walk away.
because they're asking you to invest. They truly are, and any investment requires a prospectus. Like, absolutely. And one other thing to piggyback on something you said, Steve. Everyone believes that they are too smart or too educated to fall for a cult group. And the truth is education and intelligence are literally no defense against the well-orchestrated indoctrination process. It's education. It's what you've said. That's why I appreciate your work so much.
Thank you.
I think on that note, maybe we should, and I want to give everyone a chance to sort of to finish, but I think we are bumping up against the lunch break. So let me do that, and then we will reconvene at 12:35. But I didn't mean to cut anyone off. So if you have any final words,
I just hope that we can find more ways for all of us and other people to coordinate, because on the internet, when you link to each other, you become more visible. So I'm hoping that the speakers and some of the attendees can find ways to coordinate and cross-link so we can become more visible. There are 1 million people who care about this. Somehow we have to have a bigger voice.
Absolutely.
Great point. Thank you, everybody. Amazing work.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank all the panelists. You were great, and I look forward to further helpful and interesting programs. And we have many topics for future conferences.
All right. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.